Business news from the Capital Region. This is Washington Business Report with ABC7 national correspondent Rebecca Cooper.
Thanks for joining us for a fresh look at business and finance and how it affects you. Coming up on today's show, demotivators, the people or things that suck the life out of productive workplace. We find out how to rise above. And in our roundtable this week, a top economist and the Washington Post top business and tech guy are here to tackle some of the big business headlines that could affect your bottom line. But first this week, when you have a winning formula in business, most experts say just keep doing what you're already doing. But in today's one-on-one, we talked to one of the restaurant world's most successful CEOs who took the opposite approach. Washington-based Richard Sandoval now stands at the top of the restaurant world, but after his very first restaurant got rave reviews, instead of opening another one just like it, he deliberately tried something different, new foods, new cuisines, and a fresh atmosphere. Now that the 40-something chef has opened 40 restaurants in 25 years, I wanted to know the secret ingredients in his recipe for success. Chef Richard Sandoval, welcome to Washington Business Report. I hesitate what to call you because you're a chef, but you have now become an empire. We're sitting here at Mango Tree at City Center, but tick off for our audience just how large your presence is here in the Washington area and now nationwide.
Here in Washington, we have about 7 restaurants. I came to DC, Herb Miller, the developer of Gallery Place, brought me here, 10 years ago, and, just kind of built one after another. And, today it's probably the city that have the most restaurants in is DC. Around the country and around the world, we have a total of about 40 restaurants. We're in 12 countries. We're in Dubai, Qatar, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Mexico, and mostly in the U.S.
And your father was a restaurateur.
Right.
So do you think you got your business sense from him, or was it from the banker grandfather, or where did you get that?
No, it was absolutely my father. He always, he wasn't a chef. He was a restaurateur, and his partner was a chef. So he was always a very disciplined businessman. And so, when I was working with him, he always taught me, how important it was to have a profit and loss, a balance sheet. And I think in today's world, a lot of restaurateurs and chefs fail because they don't understand the business side. You can have a fully packed restaurant and be losing money and not know it if you don't understand your numbers. And also to make, decisions, you got to be able to have information. If you don't have information, you cannot make decisions. So I was very fortunate in that sense that my father instilled that business side into me, and that's what's made me successful, I think.
So what was your first big breakthrough in terms of landing a job that helped you make your name as a chef?
Well, after working for my father for 2 years, I decided to move back to New York. I went to school in New York, so on the weekends I'd work in the city. And a friend of mine was working there, and I said, I want to leave Mexico. I want to start my own thing. And so I moved to New York City, and I opened my first restaurant there about 21 years ago. But I think my first real break came when I opened Maya, New York. It was a first 2-star Mexican restaurant in New York City. And after Ruth Reichel gave us that wonderful review, business just skyrocketed.
Then the New York Times restaurant critic, and she was very stingy with her stars.
She was very, very tough. So
I wouldn't say stingy, right? She was discerning.
Discerning, yeah. She's a great critic.
What set you apart? What there are probably more Mexican restaurants in the U.S. than anything else. Why did you decide to make yours different and stand apart? Because you decided to go more upscale.
Well, I think what was happening, at that time with Mexican food, I think people were seeing it as more Tex-Mex. There was no differentiation, and I think all the great cuisines, French, Italian, evolved for the last 20, 30 years. It went from pizzas and pastas, what everybody thought was Italian food, to the fine dining Italian restaurants. French evolved to nouvelle cuisine, to modern, to what what was more global today. But Mexican kind of stayed very stagnant. So when I went to New York, I said I went to the top Mexican restaurant. This is not what I really grew up eating in Mexico. So I think for me it was also very important to showcase my culture, not just the food. So I built this restaurant that was, I hired a friend of mine that had a beautiful hacienda in Mexico. I said, can you put your house in Manhattan? So he took his house, his art, and that was my first break.
But to be the first is always a risk.
Right.
Did it make you nervous that, what, if it's not already here, maybe it's not meant to be? Or how did you overcome? Are you a natural born risk taker? What made you decide to do that?
Yeah, I think I'm adrenaline, junkie. You know, I love the adrenaline rush. I'm definitely a risk taker. You know, I love to, you know, take chances, but how do you say measure chances? You know, I do my research and try to understand what, you know, what I'm going to do. But with Maya, the hard thing was, you know, the first reviews that I got, you know, were not very good because people did not understand. You know, people were saying, you know, well, why should we go to Maya and spend $50 when we can go to Margaritaville and spend $12?
And where are the nachos?
Exactly. So it was very, very challenging. But you know, finally I found, you know, a formula and kind of explain it to the press and saying, well, you know, you compare apples to apples. You know, compare me to a great Italian, to a great French. I'm using the same proteins. You know, the same Chilean sea bass, the same rack of lamb. But instead of, you know, creme fraiche, I use crema fresca. Instead of truffles, I use huitlacoche. Instead of thyme, I use cilantro. So I think once I started visualizing that, they understood, you know, and we're comparing apples to apples, and that's when, you know, I got the 2 stars and kind of, you know, everything took off from then.
So the other thing that people are always perplexed by your success is you build a really successful restaurant, and instead of replicating it all over the country and having one in Vegas and blah, 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 you do that some, but you also keep trying new cuisines, new destinations. Why not just replicate success? Why take a chance on a whole new type of food? This is a Thai restaurant.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, I think as a chef, you know, you want to continuously learn, you know, and learn about different cuisines, different cultures. You know, if I would have done the cookie cutter, you know, concept, I probably would have, you know, done much better. You know, maybe I would have had 30 Mayas by now. Maybe I would have sold the you never know. But I'm just not that kind of a guy. I mean, I like to, like you said, take chances. I like to...
You'd rather cook than have a private airplane.
Exactly.
Really?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
One other thing that's been kind of a guarantee in business these days is to make the most of TV opportunities and to be on every chef reality show. Why do you not do more of it if it could raise your profile?
You know, I think different than a lot of chefs, I own my company too, so I run the day-to-day. So it's not, I'm not just the front of it. You know, a lot of chefs are the front of the company, but they have a, you know, a partner behind them that's the finance and is kind of running the day-to-day. I run the day-to-day of this company. I'm involved in every space that we take, from every hotel deal that we take. So, you know, I'm very limited, you know, time-wise.
Aren't you exhausted?
You know, I actually am. You know,
you must be.
Yeah, last year I flew 250,000 miles. And I am getting tired.
So are you going to try and take a little time to enjoy it all right now, or are you already on to the next project?
You know, this year I'm opening another, I think, 6 restaurants. So, you know, every year I say I'm going to slow down, and for some reason, you know, something happens, or they make me an offer I can't refuse, and you know, and I continue to go. But I really am at a point where I really need to slow down. I mean, I've been doing this for, you know, 25 years. You know, 40 restaurants in 25 years is tremendous. I mean, it's a huge amount of restaurants. And, you know, what I like to say is I'm 47 years old, but in restaurant years, I'm about 80.
Chef Richard Sandoval, thanks for joining us on Washington Business Report.
Thank you.
And he has headed up several big-name restaurants here in Washington, D.C. Now he's heading up Mango Tree as a joint venture. We'll see how that goes as well.